The wind arrived without warning just after midnight, somewhere between mile 215 and mile 220 of the Dalton Highway in Alaska. Not the slow build of a distant storm announcing itself, a sudden wall of force that hit the side of a loaded semi like a fist. The trailer shuddered, the road disappeared, and the driver, alone in the dark, 200 miles north of the last fuel stop in North America, made a decision most people will never understand. He stopped the truck and climbed into the sleeper berth, not because he panicked, not because he had given up, because that is exactly what the job requires. Because somewhere in the training and the experience and the professional judgment that separates a veteran Arctic trucker from everyone else on Earth, he understood something that people who have never driven the haul road in January simply cannot grasp. There is a moment in every Alaskan winter storm when continuing to move becomes more dangerous than choosing to sleep. And knowing that moment, honoring it, and surviving it inside a cab the size of a large closet while temperatures outside drop toward minus 50 degrees, that is one of the least understood and most remarkable skills in modern professional trucking. This is a story about sleep. Not the comfortable kind. Not the 8-hour kind. This is about what happens when a professional driver has to rest in total darkness, in total isolation, in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, while a storm that could kill him in minutes if he stepped outside presses against the walls of his truck from every direction. If you are watching this on television and you find value in what we explore here, the simplest thing you can do to help this channel grow is subscribe and share this video. Most of our audience watches on TV, and a share is how a new person finds us. It costs nothing, and it matters more than you might think. Now, back to the story. The Dalton Highway runs 414 miles from Livengood, about 80 miles north of Fairbanks, all the way to Deadhorse, on the shore of the Arctic Ocean at Prudhoe Bay. Most of it is unpaved. Built in 1974 as a supply route for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System, it was never designed for personal vehicles. It was built for trucks. Roughly 3,700 large commercial trucks travel the road each month, delivering fuel, food, drilling equipment, and industrial supplies to the oil fields at the top of the continent. The Alaska Department of Transportation maintains 7 year-round camps along the corridor. Winter conditions can last from early August through June. The record low temperature near Coldfoot, at mile 175, is minus 74 degrees Fahrenheit. An unofficial reading of minus 82 was recorded at a nearby weather station in January 2012 before the station's battery died in the cold. At Adigan Pass, the highest maintained road point in Alaska at 4,800 feet in the Brooks Mountain Range, there are between 40 and 50 known avalanche paths. The Alaska DOT fires 11-foot-long avalanche guns at snow-covered slopes to trigger controlled slides before the unplanned kind can catch a truck on the road. When an unplanned avalanche comes anyway, and they do, the pass closes, trucks stop wherever they are, and drivers wait. In February 2017, 4 trucks were caught in avalanches between mile 241 and mile 247 at Adigun Pass. The highway stayed closed for days while crews fired howitzer shells at remaining avalanche slopes and cleared the road. Chuck Williams, a Carlisle transportation driver with 22 years on the haul road, was one of the 4. The avalanche hit the side of his truck without warning. In his own words afterward, he described the first seconds: the impact, the disorientation, the truck coming to rest in the snow. He said rescue crews could not reach him for 2 hours. He said you have to calm down. You can feel the adrenaline, and you have to stop. That ability to stop feeling the adrenaline and start managing the situation is not a personality trait. It is a professional skill, and it applies not just to the dramatic moments of an avalanche, but to the quiet, grinding hours of a long forced stop in a winter storm. Every other truck on the Dalton that day, north and south of the pass, simply stopped moving. Some were near Coldfoot, some were in the open tundra with nothing around them for 50 miles in any direction. All of them had to wait. All of them had to sleep in their trucks. Most people When they imagine a truck driver sleeping, picture a rest stop somewhere in the lower 48, a parking lot with lights, a diner nearby, cell service. The mental image carries none of the specific pressure of being parked alone on a gravel road in the Arctic, with a storm building outside and a fuel gauge that will keep dropping whether the engine runs or not. The hours of service regulations from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration require a driver to take a mandatory 10 consecutive hour rest period after 11 hours of driving. The regulation is well designed for its purpose, but on the Dalton in January, it encounters a reality that was never part of its original design. A driver who reaches his mandatory rest window north of Coldfoot does not have a truck stop available. From mile 175 to mile 414, there are 239 miles of road with no services of any kind. He pulls over wherever the road allows, often a narrow gravel shoulder with a steep drop on one side and a snowdrift on the other, and goes to sleep in an environment where the temperature outside is trying to kill him. There is a federal provision for situations like this. Under 49 CFR Section 395, 1B1, the adverse driving conditions exception permits a driver to extend his driving window by up to 2 hours when he encounters snow, ice, fog, or other dangerous conditions that were not present or foreseeable at the beginning of his trip. A storm that appeared after the driver left Fairbanks qualifies. A road closure at Adigan Pass that was not on any forecast qualifies. But the exception does not eliminate the need for rest. It simply acknowledges that sometimes the timing of that rest is dictated by the storm, not the clock. When rest finally comes, what happens inside the sleeper berth is more complex than most people have ever considered. The sleeper cab is a room, roughly 30 to 36 inches wide, and between 72 and 84 inches long depending on the truck. It has a mattress, storage compartments, and in modern trucks, a climate control system designed to operate independently of the main engine. The walls are metal, the windows are glass. On a night when outside temperatures are approaching minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the insulation separating a sleeping driver from the Arctic air is measured in fractions of an inch. The primary tool that keeps that driver alive through the night is a diesel-fired bunk heater. The most widely used brands on the haul road include Espar and Webasto units. These devices burn diesel fuel drawn directly from the truck's main tank, producing heat without requiring the main engine to run. Fuel consumption is dramatically lower than engine idling. A bunk heater burns roughly a quarter to a third of a gallon per hour, compared to approximately 1 gallon per hour at engine idle. Over a 10-hour rest stop, that difference represents 6 to 8 gallons of saved fuel. On a road where the next fuel stop may be 200 miles away, that math is never trivial. But the bunk heater is not infallible. In temperatures below minus 40, these systems can struggle. Diesel fuel changes viscosity in extreme cold, becoming thicker and less willing to flow through fuel lines. Wax crystals can partially block flow to the heater. If the heater flickers and fails at 3 in the morning when outside temperatures are at their nightly low, the driver has a narrow window to respond before the sleeper cab begins losing heat faster than a body can replace it. This is why experienced Arctic drivers do not rely on a single thermal system. They layer protections the way a mountaineer layers clothing. They carry sleeping bags rated to extreme temperatures, not as their primary heat source, but as backup. Reflective window shades on every piece of glass to reduce radiant heat loss, because glass loses warmth far faster than insulated walls. Foam pads beneath the truck mattress, because the metal surface below conducts cold upward from the frame, and a sleeping body in contact with cold metal through a thin mattress loses heat in ways no heater can fully compensate. Some drivers add their own foam insulation behind interior panels. Not factory approved, but common on the haul road, and the kind of modification the road teaches you to value. There is also the question of the engine itself. In temperatures below roughly minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit, diesel engines that are allowed to cool completely can be extremely difficult to restart. Engine oil thickens, fuel gels, battery power, already stressed by cold, may be insufficient to turn a cold engine over. Many Arctic drivers run their engines at low idle through an entire rest stop, specifically to maintain engine temperature, accepting the fuel cost in exchange for the certainty that the truck will move when the road reopens. For drivers with an auxiliary power unit, a small secondary diesel engine mounted to the truck frame, the calculation changes. An APU can power the bunk heater, charge the batteries, and in some configurations, circulate coolant through the main engine block to keep it warm enough to start. But APUs in extreme cold have their own vulnerabilities. A driver who relies entirely on an APU at -50 has bet his night's survival on a secondary machine that may never have been tested at those temperatures before. There is a weight to all of this that accumulates during a long night. The constant low-level awareness of the heater's rhythm, the fuel level, the outside temperature, the state of the road. On the Dalton, north of Adagun Pass and into the North Slope, there is no cell coverage. Not spotty coverage, but no signal at any time. The Alaska DOT maintains satellite phone capability at maintenance camps, but between those camps, a driver's communication options are a CB radio and whatever satellite messenger device he chose to carry. A Garmin InReach or similar unit allows text messages via satellite and, in an emergency, can trigger a rescue signal. But it cannot tell him when the road will reopen. It cannot connect him to dispatch in real time. On the Dalton in a storm, information is something the environment provides inconsistently at best. Experienced haul road drivers describe a particular kind of sleep they develop over years on the route. It is lighter than the sleep of someone in a warm house, more responsive, not anxious exactly, but never fully switched off. There is an awareness of sounds that do not belong, a change in the heater's rhythm, a shift in wind direction, the distant creak of the trailer frame settling under accumulated snow. A driver with 10 winters on the Dalton can wake from sleep and identify, within seconds, whether the sound that woke him is significant or not. That skill takes years to develop and cannot be taught in a classroom. And then there is the silence. One of the things that catches newer drivers on the Dalton, those coming from routes in the lower 48 where there is always some background ambient noise, is the quality of the quiet during a storm pause. The haul road in deep winter, north of Coldfoot, between 2 and 4 in the morning, produces a silence so complete that drivers describe hearing their own heartbeat. And then the wind comes back, and the truck shudders, and the silence is gone, and the driver exhales. North of Adagun Pass, the landscape changes in ways that affect how storms behave. The Brooks Range blocks a portion of southerly moisture flow, but it does not block the Arctic wind. Drivers who have cleared the pass and are running the north slope toward Deadhorse encounter what locals call a ground blizzard. Not falling snow, but existing snow, picked up from the flat tundra by sustained winds and driven horizontally with such force that visibility drops to 0 in seconds with no warning from the sky. You can look up and see stars. You can look forward and see nothing. The headlights hit driven snow at a distance of about 20 feet and reflect back as a white wall. In those conditions, experienced Dalton drivers stop and announce it on the CB. The standard haul road protocol in a visibility emergency is to call your position and intention so that trucks running behind know where you are before they encounter you. The CB radio on the Dalton is not optional equipment. It is the system that prevents trucks from driving into the back of each other during whiteouts, and the mutual aid culture among haul road drivers, sharing road condition information, warning about ice patches and drifts and visibility changes, is one of the genuine expressions of professional solidarity in a job that otherwise demands a great deal of solitary endurance. Sleeping north of the pass during a ground blizzard adds a variable drivers south of it do not encounter with the same intensity. Wind load. A sustained 40 mph Arctic wind pressing against the broadside of a 53-foot trailer exerts lateral force measured in tons. The truck does not blow over. The weight is too substantial, but it moves, not dramatically, a fraction of a degree of sway on each gust. The trailer shifts. The whole assembly breathes in the wind. Sleeping through this takes adaptation. Most experienced drivers eventually develop the ability to rest through anything short of an actual impact. But it takes winters. The thermal challenge north of the pass is more severe than most people imagine. The National Weather Service wind chill formula for minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit at 40 milliamp produces an equivalent temperature of approximately minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. At that wind chill, exposed skin can develop frostbite in under 5 minutes. A driver who steps out of the cab for any reason, to check the trailer, to clear snow from the steps, is operating on a very short clock from the moment the door opens. This is why experienced Arctic drivers dress for an exterior check the way a mountaineer dresses to leave base camp. Insulated bib overalls, a heavy parka rated to minus 60 or lower, expedition boots with genuine thermal ratings, a face covering, and goggles rather than glasses. Because glasses fog on exhalation in extreme cold and freeze in the next second. Putting on that gear takes 5 to 10 minutes. It lives in a specific location in the cab. Not randomly stored, but deliberately placed where it can be found in the dark, by feel, in an emergency. This level of preparation is not anxiety. It is professionalism. It is what years on the Dalton teaches. Mile 175 is where Coldfoot Camp sits, the northernmost truck stop in North America. Founded by Iditarod champion Dick Mackey, who started by cooking hamburgers from a converted school bus in 1981. The truckers who stopped there were so grateful that they used surplus materials from their own freight loads, scrap wood from pipeline insulation crates, to build the permanent structure that became Coldfoot Camp. The name itself comes from the gold prospectors of 1900, who, having traveled this far north, looked at the approaching winter and turned around. They got cold feet. The truckers who built Coldfoot did not. During the December 2025 storm closure that shut down Atigun Pass, trucks staged at Coldfoot for hours, while DOT crews worked on avalanche mitigation and blizzard conditions continued across the north slope. The parking lot fills with idling semis, their exhaust hanging motionless in air so cold that the vapor column barely moves until the next gust takes it. The cafe is open. The fuel pumps are running. But not every truck makes it to Coldfoot before a closure. Some are caught north of the pass, between the Brooks Range and the Arctic Ocean, with nothing around them and hours of waiting ahead. The drivers who have been on the Dalton for years do not consider any of this to be exceptional. Ask them about sleeping in a storm at minus 40 north of the Arctic Circle, and they will talk about their heater setup, their sleeping bag rating, their fuel management strategy, as though they are describing any other logistical problem. They will tell you about the specific sound a bunk heater makes when cycling properly at very low temperatures, and how it differs from the sound it makes when struggling, and how you learn to hear that difference in your sleep without fully waking. They will tell you, if they are in a reflective mood, about the particular quality of the silence north of the pass at 4 in the morning when the storm has paused and the sky has cleared and the aurora is moving above the tundra in green curtains and violet columns, while the truck sits in the dark and the driver is the only human being for 50 miles in any direction. That is the part of the job that does not appear in any pay stub. The silence and the cold and the aurora and the responsibility and the quiet professional pride of having managed a night that most people cannot even picture from the comfort of a warm room. It is not glory. It is something quieter than that and more durable. The next time a winter storm warning appears on your television and you make the reasonable decision to stay home, think for a moment about the trucks that are already north of wherever safe means. Think about the drivers who have already made their decision, who are already parked in the dark on a gravel road above the Arctic Circle, monitoring a heater, checking a sleeping bag, listening for a sound that does not belong, and waiting for the road to reopen so they can keep moving. They are not performing heroism. They are doing their job, and the job requires them to sleep well in the worst possible conditions and to wake up ready to drive. Most of the time, the road opens. Most of the time, the heater holds. Most of the time, the driver gets to dead horse and turns around and comes home. And if surviving a winter storm alone in the Arctic is already more than most people knew about this job, there is another kind of extreme waiting in a different season. One that does not involve cold at all. Because the same roots that freeze in January can burn in summer. The corridors of smoke and fire that Alaska's wildfire seasons carve across the landscape create a completely different set of survival challenges for the drivers who have no choice but to keep moving through them. That story is next.